The dragon, he was a dangerous monster. The royal family wouldn't stop going on about how vile and corrupt he was. Even the court jester, who possessed the ability to break wind voluntarily, let one rip at the very mention of his name. But Princess Regina was of an entirely different opinion. That dragon is more human than all of you put together, Regina thought to herself. Like the others, Regina was afraid of him, but not because of his shiny fangs, his scaly tail, or the enormous rack of horns wrapped around his scalp. It was because he'd always managed to talk her into entering his cave, where he'd proceed to ravage the lovely princess for days on end. Her hair thoroughly frazzled with opaque and pink stains splattered all over her regal gown, she'd be greeted with upturned noses upon her return to the palace. In the throne room of the castle, the king and queen had their daughter pull up a lawn chair so that they might have a serious talk. They'd broach the embarrassing subject with Merlin the wizard, in addition to members of parliament and the church. All of them were in agreement that the princess must never venture into the outskirts of the kingdom for any reason ever again. Hardly congenial for a lady who had been distinguished with such a supreme title. It was giving the entire family a bad name. Both her honor and chastity were being questioned by the local gentry. It was for the sake of her own protection above all. "That dragon is in exile for a good reason, my lady," said her father. The loins of the gorgeous princess tasted of citric bursts of passion sweeter than the fruit caressed by the malevolent serpent in the Garden of Eve. A flare-up of gingivitis took root within the fire-breather's mouth after having gone for an entire 3 days without a visit from the Gothic maiden. A temper tantrum ensued. He hurled himself on the ground and flailed about angrily, kicking up soils and rocks and wiping out entire villages with his hypomanic tail. Volcanoes erupted. Earthquakes in Paraguay wiped out over 100,000 of its citizens. Tsunamis transformed Japan into a veritable Atlantis. The wildfires in California were made to look like a couple 10-year-olds playing with a pack of matches every time the monster exhaled flames from his nostrils. The princess attributed her fear to the dragon because of his power to magically incinerate every thread of clothing covering her mouth-watering body. That he could do this without searing so much as a single hair on her head set her heart to pitter-pattering whenever she thought about it. This only occurred when she entered the taboo regions of the surrounding woods. Despite being forbidden, the entitled damsel found herself venturing out into them time and time again, her journeys inevitably leading to that monstrosity of a swain. Entwined with subversive theories and aphorisms, his smoky growl never failed to capsize her inhibitions, rendering her impulses entirely defenseless in the face of the reptilian Casanova. She was afraid of the seductive monster in so much as she was afraid of herself, considering how delighted she'd feel to be devoured and digested by the dragon, sliding down into the acidic pool of his stomach after having been drained of all life between his tongue and the crushing embrace of his molars. This was a terror that would have completely consumed the poor girl if she didn't project it onto the mythical beast dwelling deep in the hinterlands, far away from the comforts of her stately residence. But now she'd come to fear something else entirely, The gossip being spread had sullied her image to such a degree that her coveted crown had come into jeopardy. On top of this, the dragon was turning out to be less than the perfect darling he presented himself to be. News of his dirty deeds were coming back to the princess. Perhaps she was not so unique and thus less immune to his destruction. After swallowing this bitter pill, she came to the realization that she could very well be added to his list of casualties, echoing through the pale caverns of her ears. The vicious roars and stomping feet of the jade behemoth was now causing her to fear for her very life. Nonetheless, knowledge of his innocent victims compelled Regina to go against her parents' wishes. Knowing that merely a visit from her would assuage the dragon's rage, she snuck out of the kingdom and into the swarthy forest, traveling along its ominous trail with nothing save for the light of the moon and the stars to guide her to their meeting place. She'd come to meet the dragon by dawn. The mist creation lay there dejectedly before her, the lower half of his body inside his cave, the frontal portion sticking out. He'd blown out his throat from the ruckus he'd instigated and was now suffering from an irksome case of laryngitis. His serpentine eyes dilated into a pair of life-nurturing planets as soon as the honeysuckle scent of her skin reached his senses. The whimpers of a puppy seeped out from between his chapped lips after catching sight of his beloved. For generations I've been targeted as a monster, he wheezed, but I thought you saw beyond this, my love. I once fancied myself as possessing traits such as yours, but over the years I came to detest the entire lot of your species. But if being human entailed being blessed with all of your characteristics, not to mention having you as a lover without the threat of ostracism, I'd gladly give up all these priceless treasures I've been guarding just to be with you. I don't think you're a monster at all. Your love is the sweetest and most genuine I've ever encountered. Furthermore, I'm head over heels in love with you. I'd kill or die to give birth to your demonic lizard babies. She cried and flung her arms around the creature's expansive cranium. With her tantalizing palm, she went on to massage one of the many amber fins trailing down his spinal column, further consoling him by adding, "You're more human than anyone I've ever known." What the princess didn't know was that this dragon had once been a handsome prince. A witch had placed a curse on him in a thwarted effort to steal his family's fortune. All that was needed to break the curse was for someone of pure heart and soul to believe he was not a monster at all, but a human being. But just believing was not enough. An additional requirement would certify his eternal damnation. The witch was convinced that no one would be courageous enough to go near the colossal abomination. The individual who had faith in the dragon's humanity had to speak of this directly to him if the curse were to be subverted. Regina proved brave and authentic enough to fulfill this challenging mission. After 16 centuries, the wicked spell was finally put to rest. The dragon's eyes went from crimson to sparkling blue. His mile-long tail shrunk down into the modest nub of a tailbone, and his flaring muzzle gave way to the chiseled features of a sexy young blonde. Although this new look was excessively scrumptious to the dark-eyed girl, she couldn't help but worry that his prowess in the sack would be less fiery. Indeed, the prince's knack for knocking boots proved altogether scorching. A single kiss from her newfound love would whisk every article of clothing from off her immaculate body, her ejaculate so profuse as to leave raspberry-flavored stalactites hanging off the ceiling of the former dragon's cave before sundown.